All right, good people. We should be coming on over. Let me pull up my colleagues to this side, and then we will go ahead and pick up where we left off and get to some Q&A. Not live. Anyway, folks, this is I'm Jared Ball. We're moving to the second hour, the Q&A session of this discussion. And in just a second, when I get all my folks up here, we will go ahead and get started. We do still have all the questions. Oh, no, we don't. Oh, the questions don't migrate. Good people. We're going to have to ask you to re-ask those questions, unfortunately. Oh, man, I did not know that. And let's see. Attendee not live. Where is everybody? Did folks not make it over here yet? I see Craig is over here. Who else is not here? Including my 30. Here are the live folks. Let's see. Let me get in Mjiba. Let's see. We found Mjiba. Let's see. I don't see Todd or Eli for some reason. Peace, good people. There we go. Although I feel like it should have been more smooth than that. There we go. What's up, sister?
Hi. Hey. Sorry about the delay. I don't know what happened on my end.
Yeah, I'm not sure what's going on. I don't see Todd or Yelly yet either. I see other folks coming over. That it should be more smooth. Something else is going on, but I don't see. Well, let me ask folks, because unfortunately this is my fault, because I was sure that the questions from session 1 would migrate over here. So if folks would please not mind re-asking their questions, and I do apologize, I'll take, that's my responsibility. I was sure they migrated. It doesn't at all make sense. And then what we'll try to do in the future is just ask people to hold off on the questions until this part of this, so we make sure we're not losing anything. Well, Mjiba, I don't see Todd and Yeli yet. Maybe we should we get started with the first question that I see in there? I'd like to at least, I know I definitely want to answer some of the questions that were raised already.
Maybe you can start by answering that, because we're kind of like a carryover. You know what I mean?
Right.
As in when they come, you can bring them in.
All right. Well, let me say this though, because and I actually wrote this down. Although I didn't want Todd to hear this, because he's talking about, well, first of all, the NNPA, the National Newspaper Publishers Association, headed now by Ben Chavis, is your question to me about buying power and Black capitalism. They are one of the major purveyors of the myth of Black capitalism and buying power and banking Black, because they're, of course, using that claim to attract white advertising dollars for their commercial media operations. So they need to convince corporations that Black people have the money to buy those products. So they are, I think, one of the reasons why we have had some of the problems that we've had bridging some of these gaps generationally. To Todd's point, today's activists in some ways skipping over, important histories in terms of their reference, is because so much of their own media environment has been constructed similarly, not entirely by the Black commercial press, but in a similar fashion, certainly the white media environment is of no help. But my point is the entire media environment at best is advocating that they engage in Black entrepreneurialism or buying Black or banking Black or some sort of Black capitalist entrepreneurial endeavor as part of the response. And then even the folks that Todd mentioned in terms of our dear comrade, Brother Joe Torres, Gonzalez, in their great book on the history of media in this country, the name of which just slipped my mind, News for All the People. But Joe Torres is one of the authors of a new statement that came out last month, I believe, on media reparations. And what I felt like they were doing in that same argument was reducing the need for a media environment to adjust itself to its own complicity in abusing us, to just sort of the same kind of, they don't really have a clear plan, so to speak, like the reparations movement, but a lot of what they were arguing was something similar, like there needs to be some sort of policy or funding for Black media or something like that. And it's the same kind of approach that I struggle with, that how is our assumption of power being funneled into let's make appeals to the environment, to the apparatus that must maintain things as it is, or in some similar fashion to maintain themselves and manage public opinion, and the constant extraction of wealth and so on and so forth. So I feel like we're being very limited in our standards, in part because of what Todd talked about, that so much of our histories have been wiped out. So we're not even tapping into this deep reservoir of potential response because so much of it has been. And then lastly, to this point about ADOS is not more organized. ADOS has a more easily digestible slogan that is perfect for this disorganized social media environment that we're stuck in. So they have been supported by some very conservative, including white church and other conservative organizations. They have some very talented and capable spokespeople who have built up, not under the ADOS flag, built up, but under a different sort of Black, sort of critical, approach. They built up an audience that sort of unleashed the ADOS thing late in their development, but they use that capability, their talent, their this new amount of funding, this slick upgrade in their technology for in terms of cameras and mics and backgrounds and editing. They've taken all of that again and distilled a very simple message: only Black people, ADOS a hashtag, and give us a check. There's not a lot of nuance, there's not a lot of complexity, and there's zero Black radical tradition politics. So it's not that they're more organized, it's that they don't have to be as well organized, because they're not, first of all, they're not truly endeavoring to get anything. This reparations ploy is not going to get anything. And they're not asking people to really organize themselves to assume power. They're just asking people to click and like and chastise people who don't agree with them for the purposes of getting a little bit of a handout, which will benefit a Black bourgeoisie and ultimately nobody else. So we have a lot more work to do in terms of organizing to combat that, because we have more nuance, more complexity, and we want actual political power. So we have a different, I think, agenda than they do, and that's why they have. That's why they're where they are. So let me stop there and see if we can pull some of these folks back in.
Ayele and Connor are back. But
I see.
Before you say that, let me ask you a question. Does ADOS not want political power?
No, I don't think so. Look, so from my perspective, look, and as somebody who had been involved with Yvette and Tone for some years, going back to when they were not where they are now, first of all, they don't come out of a tradition of Black activism, of organization, certainly any radical tradition.
Wait, Jared. We're coming in late, and it sounds good. We don't even know what you're talking about.
My bad. We were trying to do a holdover, so
were we?
My bad. And I'm rushing. ADOS, Kenny. I'm glad Kennedy doesn't know what ADOS. ADOS stands for American Descendants of Slavery, and they have a basic. slavery. They have a basic argument that says only Black Americans, not Africans of the diaspora, not Latinos, not indigenous people, nobody else, just Black Americans deserve reparations, that Black people should not unify with any of these other groups in as part of that path. And what I'm just saying, ELE, here is that that they're not more organized. They're more well-funded by white and other conservative outfits, and they have a more easily digestible hashtag slogan that has almost no nuance, no need for deep thought or discussion, and it doesn't need any real organization. It just needs some clicks, some likes. They can get on CNN, they can get on other commercial mainstream media, they can get a few politicians to say something about reparations. They can trick, I think, people like Cornel West and others to pass through and support them. We do something we should also talk about at some point, elders who aren't always paying attention carefully enough to the people inviting them to spaces. They have this ability, and then they get the uptick in funding, so they get some new mics and some new cameras. They get rid of some other co-hosts that have problematic associations for them. They get rid of other associations that have problematic politics for what they want. And they attack everybody, and they literally tell what Todd was warning against. They literally said to me specifically and many others, we don't care and don't need Malcolm, Martin, other than their use of the slogan, some bastardized version of King to get a check, which is totally distorting his own message. We don't need Robeson. We don't need Asada. We don't need George Jackson. We don't need Garvey, Du Bois, or Booker T. They've been very clear. Mm-hmm. We don't need any of them. We just need what we are arguing. We have the ideas. And if we get this reparations, will more or less be good. So they're not trying to assume political power. They're not trying to change the nature of the state or anything about it. They're trying to get a piece of the pie, and have found a very conservative lane to drive in, which will get them this kind of support. And that's why they're doing what it is. I think that they're able to do what it is that they're doing.
But Jared, let me say this though. I want to contest something that you said. First of all, I agree with 100%. But I think that they are trying to assume political power. It's not for you or me, but they are trying to. They do want political power, right? They want political power. They want political power in the U.S. capitalist system because they somehow believe that the way in which they, individuals, let's be clear, it's not about all African people and all Black Americans. They're not really concerned about that, right? It's about their individual pocketbooks, their individual positions in governments, their individual positions in NGOs. So really, quite frankly, they do want political power. They just don't want political power like you or I want political power, right? They're in the same camp as those Africans who be on MSNBC talking the rhetoric, the watered down rhetoric about what Black people haven't got in America, so they themselves can get some millions of dollars from corporations to fatten their pockets. They don't care about the masses of people, quite frankly.
It's like,
thank you for that clarification. Thank you for that clarification.
Yeah. And to the point made, I don't even think they want a small piece of the pie, because I think that's what they think they're asking for. And I think they think they're asking for power, but really what they want is a voice, you know what I mean? Which ain't the same thing. And I think it's not even a small piece of the pie. That's them not understanding what the nature of the pie. They want a bigger crumb. Absolutely. Like that's really, ultimately, they want a bigger crumb, because that's all they're really asking for, a check. And not understanding global white supremacist capitalism. It's a global system, and they talking to the United States as if this is where real power begins and ends, in this one nation state. They don't understand the nature of empire. They don't understand the nature of like the global economic structures that control their lives. And that's the problem. So they wouldn't even know how to take power. You know what I mean? They wouldn't even know how to operate from a powerful place within that, because it's just a fundamental, and it's ahistorical, to Todd's point. This is why modernity is so important. Mamas study lineages and they teach their children about the past so that no one is forgotten. The old folks, the babies, and the future ones. Like everybody has to know. But this is really important because The irony is American descendants of slaves or American descendants of slavery, but they don't even study slavery. They don't even study it. They don't even know nothing about it. You know, like they don't even understand that a significant number of the people who would call themselves foundational Black Americans and American descendants of slavery were actually brought here after several generations of being enslaved in the Caribbean. So like, where are we drawing the line? They don't understand the global impact of the transatlantic trade and enslaved Africans on the continent of Africa, which has led to a series of unfortunate events that mean this is why many of them end up immigrating over here, because of these destroyed and underdeveloped societies. You know, have they read Walter Rodney? No, he's probably another one of those intellectuals they need to throw away.
No, because he's from the Caribbean. He's not even ADOS. You can't read Rodney.
Exactly. Who is that? Who is that? So they don't even understand how these global systems work. They don't understand if we're trying to use this check to fight against, you know, drugs and you know, get our people off the street and out the criminal justice system, that the brothers and sisters in Colombia and South America are on the opposite end of the same war on drugs, dealing with the same issue, just at a different chain in the machine, a different part of this process, and that our destiny and our struggles here are linked to theirs, and you can't solve one problem without dealing with it holistically. But that's the myopia of it all is really connected to a lot of stuff that Jared, I hear you saying in your book, The Myth and Propaganda of Black Buying Power. The fact that our history books teach this wrong, From Slavery to Freedom, John Hope Franklin's book, that title itself is a problem. We start our history in slavery and we think we're making progress and that we really have a shot. You know, we just buy in more and ask for, you know, a toe in the door, then we've got it. And I think that's really, I think, some of the issue. Like we're miseducated and we're moving forward in ignorance, pushing ourselves further and further away from what knowledge of our history and the way this stuff works that we do already have. So
and can I just, yeah, and I just want to jump in here about this ADOS thing, right? Again, I generally don't waste my time critiquing institutions whose ideology I don't necessarily agree with, because I think it's a waste of time. It's certainly a divide and conquer tactic, maybe inside, maybe outside. But the fundamental contradiction that I have with ADOS is that, one, it's xenophobic, as someone said in the chat. But if you look at their website, ADOS 101, right, /about-ADOS, there isn't really a lot of xenophobic, anti-African, anti-Pan-African propaganda, right? And really, it's in line with this Black buying power, building wealth in the African community or the Black community in the US. I fundamentally don't agree with that position. But the fundamental contradiction that I have, because I think that doesn't do anything, right? Particularly if we're talking about a capitalist system where profit is over people and white people are also struggling financially and are not benefiting from capitalism. So how is it that you, an African, right, who is an American descendant of slavery, how are you going to benefit when white people who are American descendants of slavers are not benefiting? I'm confused about that. But what fundamentally has me angry about ADOS is the fact that they spend their time on the YouTube, right, on Twitter, on whatever, bashing Pan-Africanists, being ahistorical, not reading, and ultimately having a very dogmatic, monolithic approach and analysis to the African community, right? And I think that here, for me, I think that's a fundamental contradiction. Because, for example, I don't agree with every organization. But at the end of the day, am I going to go and tear down organizations if, in fact, they're trying to do something positive for the African community? And I think we have to have a standard in the African community around who can speak for us. And lastly, on the ADOS thing, I want to go back to this being ahistorical. First of all, it's called the trans means 1, 2, 3, right? Transatlantic slave trade. So that means that people were dropped off and moved between multiple continents. So even if one wants to say only Black people in America could get access to reparations, what about the families that were left on the continent where your people were stolen from? What about those people? Huh? What about the Jamaicans? What about the folks in Brazil? So there isn't even any critical or nuanced thought to this question around American descendants of slavery. Lastly, I'm off my soapbox on this, but lastly, anybody who calls themselves a straight up American is doing what? Is justifying the continued rape and murder and annihilation of the indigenous people whose land in which you all are currently sitting on.
Right on. Let me, I have the unenviable task of trying to segue from that. But let me just ask these couple of questions that we have here. And folks, please forgive me if you had questions in the other session. It is my fault entirely that they don't transfer, and I didn't know that, and I said that they would. So please ask them again, and I deeply apologize for that. Let me just throw a couple of questions out, and hopefully we'll get Todd back. I don't know what happened here. A couple of them is Black Alliance for Peace and I would add, are other organizations similar to that? Are they as Keenan, or I think if I'm pronouncing the name correctly, is asking, would you consider Black Alliance for Peace organization as organized? And then Craig is asking, to piggyback off of Dr. Burroughs' thoughts regarding the factionalization of Black organizations, what are the principles that we should be organizing around, and to what end? And then I'll ask this third point from Dwayne: is a united front the same as a coalition? So in other words, is United Front coalition, are entities like BAP, Black Alliance for Peace, organized? What principles or around which should we be organizing? Anybody want to jump in on that? And folks, if you're out there and want to come on screen to make a comment or question, please get our attention in the chat. We can do that as well. Go ahead, Todd.
I just wanted to say the little piece on maybe defining Black media, since I helped to ideologically define it in my scholarship. Roland Martin has a very good practical definition that I like, is that he says Black media has to be Black owned, Black oriented, and Black targeted. What I established in my doctoral dissertation, which is, 20 years old very soon, is that there are two prongs of Black media. Black media is supposed to do two things. One is to fight white hegemony. We can say white European hegemony, etc. The second is to reaffirm the African and the African American identity. If you do those two things in a pure spirit, you are Black media.
But what about the problem of Roland Martin's, that the part he leaves out is the attraction of white corporate advertising, which is why I would argue you don't see anything to the left of the Democratic Party on his platform, and why at the bottom of his unfiltered page he promotes the buying power myth, because he's trying. So to me, one of the problems that we face is that it doesn't matter the color or gender or even or sexual orientation of the owner. Right. If in this context, the only way to be commercial and viable and survive is to get that white corporate ad money, which is what is the true manager of content in our media environment.
Roland comes from both the left and the right, and he manages that balance very well. He is a born-again Christian from Texas who is married to a minister, right? So he balances those things very, very well. What's missing, Dr. Ball, and I know you know this, is what's missing is the ideological diversity of our current discussion that used to be on op-ed pages, that used to be on Black radio shows, Black radio stations like WIB and WOL, and these used to be places where we would argue over which direction we would go. And the people who would be doing the arguing would actually have facts, would actually participated in movements. So like it would be an informed discussion.
But he literally had a dude on there who said, if you don't vote for Biden, you're a traitor.
Yeah.
So there is no discussion on that platform. That's what I'm saying. So
and that's the new era that we're living in. Now, you know, if my old paper that I loved so much, the City Sun, existed now, because the City Sun was the first newspaper, and probably the only Black newspaper other than the Atlanta Daily World, which is a Republican paper. The City Sun was the only Black newspaper to not endorse Jesse Jackson for president in 1988, and said so in a front page editorial, called him a sellout in a front page editorial. This is the ideological discussion that we used to have, that we are now afraid to have because, Dr. Ball, as you're pointing out, the corporate sponsorships. WLIB existed. Imhotep Gary Bird existed on WLIB with a 3-hour show from the Apollo. Why? Because WBLS had made so much money, it could subsidize WLIB.
Let me, Yeli, I think you had something to say. I don't want us to take up too much of this time. We're already halfway through the Q&A, and I know Yeli, go ahead.
So the question about what should be our objectives and I guess our guiding principles. That's a wonderful question, and these things come up often when we have these dialogues, as you all know. But I also believe that that's not strategically sound for us to like hash out every detail on here. And it's not for the four of us to tell you, it's for all of us. So if we do attempt to answer this question, I really would like to hear from all of you in the chat, and even if you want to get on and speak to that question. It's something we must do as a collective. Again, I'm a proponent of modernity, and we can't reproduce this structure, and that's not the goal of our town hall, to reproduce this structure where, you know, the four of us are kind of we get the first opportunity to speak, but it definitely doesn't end with us. So what do we think? You know, modernity has a lot of ideas about guiding principles or values, and some of that's in the report, and definitely the Diane Jakite article that is cited at the end of the report. But outside of that, there, you know, and I have examples to the, you know, the question Jeepa asked, like, what are examples of that? But I definitely would much rather hear the collective speak on this, and the collective includes all of you. What should our objectives be? What do we want? If we believe we are progressive, if we believe we are revolutionaries, then what is it we want? We could take this opportunity to set an agenda. You know, if we're critical of Obama and we're critical of ADOS or, you know, whatever, the bots are listening, you know, and then all the other folks, they're always among us. But whatever we feel safe and okay saying, I think we should put it out there. And also, you know, all of us have work out there, like the four of us. We all have made public statements many times about what we think folks might want to be thinking about.
Do either of you or any of you, I want to echo what Yeli is saying about others being involved, and we do have one other question, but I just want to ask if any of you have any specific thoughts on the Black Alliance for Peace question, or the point about United Front being the same as coalition. From my quick vantage point, at least Black Alliance for Peace is clear in its ideological perspective. It does have a structure of leadership and committees. I am technically a member, so you know, not nearly as active or involved, but you know, so to that extent, I think they're on the right track, and just need more support and whatever. But and I do think United Front is the same as coalition, but maybe I'm wrong about that. What do you all think about that?
Well, I think honestly, first of all, I think Black Alliance for Peace is a amazing organization. I think that individuals can join, and also organizations can have representatives, right? So I think that's really clear. I'm not. I don't want to toot my horn or toot the APRP's horn, but I'm just saying. I'm just saying. A lot of people in the Black Alliance for Peace used to be or affiliated with the APRP, right? And so what does that say? That doesn't say, oh, the APRP is some amazing institution that nobody has, but it talks about the evolution of organizations, how people can transition in and out of organizations, you know, how people can make contributions in different spaces. And I think that that's important. And the one thing that the APRP has that some organizations have, but not all organizations have, is a political education process, right?
Right.
And that political education process, sometimes it works well, sometimes it doesn't work well. We push work study. Like, to be a member in the AAPRP, one must be in a work study circle or cell. You must read something, you must discuss it, you must think through the clear ideology, the clear principles, right? We're in Incrumis Terreus. Everyone doesn't necessarily have to be an Incrumis Terreus, but what I would suggest is that if one is in an organization, they should be in an organization that clearly stands for something, right? And that clear standing for something, you have to have some level of historical analysis, right, about what it is that you stand for, right? And it can't be some romanticized, oh, I stand for it because Mjiba does. No, Mjiba is a human just like everybody else, you know? And I just want to go back to this question Todd raised on the other session about this new media and how it's kind of throwing away these divergent discussions, and also this question about like the corporatization of media, right? So we know everybody has blogs, right? Everybody got a blog. And now, I don't know if you all are following, for those of us in Ghana, everybody and their mama who's a diasporan, they have a Return to Africa blog, right? How many times, I don't mean any harm. I truly don't mean no harm. But how many times can it be like, trip to Macola Market? Oh, this is how much it costs to buy a car in Ghana. Oh, this is what it costs to buy an orange. Oh, you know, do's and don'ts about traveling to Ghana. Do's and don'ts, how, you know, and it's like, it's beyond comprehension to me. Now, see, here's the thing. There's some positive blogs that people are just talking about their life, walking over in the night to take a stroll. Isn't this great? Look at the trees. You know, so certainly there's some education, but then there's some clear anti-African propaganda, which is also about likes and followers, right? So there's a couple of people who are vloggers, or V whatever in the Gambia, in Ghana, that come on and they're saying all these disparaging and negative things about Ghana. I moved here. This is so horrible. Blog. Thank you very much, Dwayne. Everybody's helping me out today. You know, I moved here and don't move here. People are scamming you and they want to do this and they want to steal all your money and all. And I'm just like, go back. But guess what happens? People are using it just like Roland Martin. I'm not down with Roland Martin, but people are using YouTube, these blogs, these vlogs, all of these different things to make a living. And what they're doing is one of two things is happening. One, people are using the Pan-African education and sweat of our ancestors and those who have fought and organized their organizations to then educate people from a Pan-African perspective and charge them. The other side of it is people are using their personal lives to make money through corporations. And the last side of it, which is the most dangerous, is that people are using African people as pawns and dividing us in order for them to make big money, right? And I think that we really need to have conversations about this. How can you have somebody move from the US to Ghana or Gambia and be talking disrespectfully about Ghanaian or Gambian people? And the problem is folks in the US are so ignorant that they follow it and they start talking crap also about Ghana or the Gambia or whatever. I'm done, off my soapbox.
Just from a moment ago, Yeli said something. I just wanted to I forgot to add. I wanted to add, you know, I have a colleague, just one more thing on this ADOS thing. I think it's so funny that I have a colleague from Liberia who tells a story of how her ancestors were enslaved from the continent, dragged over here, raised up here in the Baltimore, Maryland area, and then were part of that repatriation or whatever back to what is now Liberia. And then she's like, so why would, but ADOS would say, you have no, you don't count. So it's like, it's just so illogical. We do have someone was asking us, Keenan was asking if we've already talked about Joy Reid and Van Jones. There was no specific question or comment. I would just argue that, what more is there to say when Van Jones is on CNN crying, saying that now that Biden is elected, his children can now sleep comfortably. I mean, and Joy Reid is, so I have it on, I have to admit, I'll say this, I don't have the so-called smoking gun evidence, but I have it on good authority that a good friend of mine was told by a former producer of the Joy Reid show a couple years ago, that Reid has a do not invite list that my friend was on. And I only bring that up to say that to the extent that it's true, and I have no problem believing that it is, I don't think my friend would lie about this, but also just in general, I believe that these kinds of lists exist. Even if it didn't, you could just tell by the content of her program that the list exists in terms of who is never on there, the ideas are never discussed. But my point is that it doesn't matter what I think about these folks personally, or even what I think of their politics. They're there to play a particular role. They serve a function. And just real quick, when the Pew Research Center did a study earlier this year that showed that MSNBC and CNN have more of an audience that identifies with the Democratic Party than Fox News does identifying with the Republicans. In other words, Fox News is actually, according to Pew, slightly more politically diverse than the so-called left. What that means, though, is that anyone who is on CNN or MSNBC at least more than once is going to have to feed that audience. They don't want to hear anything that audience doesn't want to hear and, of course, pay for. So this is why, we have to look very, it's not a personal thing. We just have to say, they're not allowed. They can't use that space any differently. So we shouldn't expect more. Go ahead, Yelly.
Can I just say two things?
Oh,
I'm sorry for laughing at you. I'm not laughing. I was laughing at Lee Fox in the comments. I'm so sorry.
The chat is funny.
No,
so sorry.
I just saw that.
The chat is hilarious. Real quick, speaking of MSNBC, it brought to mind a conversation I had with one of the talking black heads on MSNBC, and this was years ago, but this individual was kind of offering me a door in and saying I should be one of these talking black heads on MSNBC. And I kind of asked this person why, because it concerned me, because I'm thinking I'm a revolutionary. I'm like, wait a minute. And it was like, but you have a TV face. And it wasn't about my politics, my scholarship, it was about palatability for TV. And I articulate myself a certain way. And then the next phase of the conversation was about how I would need to probably reshape and retool my messaging and the way I dress. So needless to say, that was a done conversation. But what's interesting is, and I'm channeling my inner Paul Mooney here, he in many of his stand-up shows, he'd be like, don't like me too much, the white folks will get me, right? The white folks will take me. And I feel like for many of us who would consider ourselves revolutionaries or even activists, we're in more danger than the black folks who are clamoring to get chose, right? As they say, chose by white America. We're the ones that they want, because the goal is really to neutralize these messages, and so we're at greater risk for that. And I think one of the ways to inoculate ourselves from that is to join an organization. And I'm trying to lead into this question about, like, how do we go into these organizations and make them more effective? And then from there, how do we build coalitions or a united front? And I think, again, Todd gave us a really awesome example of how he was able to use the space that he was in to put forth, and just even on an individual personal level, he was able to do one thing, one amazing piece of work that the organization, it was not on their agenda, is not aligned necessarily with the mission or the ideology, but he went in and created the space. And if we go into these organizations, yes, it's important to find organizations that we're ideologically aligned with. But I think joining an organization, regardless of if there's an exact alignment, but really going in with a certain intention to maintain your standards and your stance is important. Because then they, if you get into these more revolutionary organizations, they can't snatch you up that as easily, and because you're doing the work. And I think, again, I really, really urge people to check out the ideas and the principles of modernity. It's really simple, basic stuff. It's stuff that we try to practice when we're dealing with our family members. But when we're out here in these organizations, we're just like rogue individuals trying to organize, but we're like crumbly inside. And, no one ever asks us, like, have you eaten? Or if we're going out to do a march or whatever, who's watching the babies? Like, we don't raise these basic questions. How's your mental health? Like, I guess now we're trying to do that, right? But we're also holding up the mirror to each other and finding ways to be constructively self-critical within the organization. If you need to go to an organization and you need to be the voice of that, to help promote these better practices that help strengthen your organization and solve some internal tensions, then that's what we need to kind of focus on, because I really don't think our organizations are going to, the turnover rate is too high. These organizations get birthed and then they die because we haven't checked that part of the organizing. So again, for me, I'm not necessarily seeing reparations and organizing as oppositional, but I'm saying one must come before the other. And even before we think about organization, we have to think about our approach to organizing and making sure we're organizing in a way that is healthy and creates a sustainable organization as well. So
Kwame Zulu keeps putting stuff in the questions to you, Yeli, and I keep trying to get him to say it out more publicly. But one of the things he said was for you to go ahead and get that bag, and I'm saying he should go back and see the first hour again, because that was the whole point of the reparations thing, that we can't be just chasing the bag. But I want to say just very quickly that I think when I had to do what was supposed to be a sabbatical at the Real News Network, I always remember that Paul Jay, the former head of it, the white man who formerly ran it, he wanted me to be the anchor of one of their news programs, but he said he wanted me to wear a tie. And I said, I don't wear ties. Like, this is a major problem for me. Like, I feel all kinds of psychological trauma when I put on a tie, so I won't wear a tie. And he said, well, then we'll have to reposition you, because what he said was, even though we are an alternative outfit, our audience wants the news delivered in a traditional way. And I was like, damn. I was like, see, that's one major problem. Now, I won't put this brother on the spot. He may or may not be out here, may or may not want to comment on this, but I do remember, I just want to quickly blend a quick story here. When I was also working at the Real News, Glenn Ford and I were supposed to debate Michael Eric Dyson and what's the brother's name? James Richardson, the now deposed or whatever, James Richardson. And it didn't go well. It was I was horrible. Glenn was not on his game. Dyson, I think, won the whole thing. I'm on some levels glad it never aired. Like, the Real News shut it down. They were like, Jared, you were terrible. The whole place was like, you were all disappointed in my performance, right? But what I remember saying to people in my circle was, the mistake I made was that I didn't do this as a representative of an organization who would have been on point to tell me, this is not what you're supposed to be doing. This is not your lane, and this is not what we need you to do. And that my point being that when we operate as collectives and organizations, which is one of the main reasons why I love what we're trying to do here, and selfishly love my participation in it, is because it keeps us on certain levels of check. And when I used to be a more active member of grassroots organizations, we did have that policy we had spokespeople who would say X, Y, and Z to X, Y, and Z outlet, pre-approved. If you were going on a panel, you're representing this, that, and the third. So it reduced the amount of potential for us to make these kinds of political and performative mistakes. And then lastly, the spot I was talking about was that Dyson told this brother at one point something to the effect, I'm trying to help Jared not become a marginalized Black nationalist in the academic world. In other words, people know that their public performance has rewards or punishment, and they're making very conscious decisions in what they do. Now, I will stop. That's the last thing I'm going to say as the moderator for this, but I just wanted to make those quick points. Anybody want to respond to any of that? We do have a couple of quick questions here. Kwame is saying, is there complementary for fathernity of male energy?
Again, I just wanted to, because I get that question often, modernity is not tied to a gender. It is a relational category. It's a relationship that is guided by certain principles of ethics. So you don't have to be a woman to practice modernity. That's what I think people kind of, again, we got to let go of the Western gender baggage when we're thinking about African understandings of this relational category are very expansive and go way beyond the physiological, the biological. This is why men mother and women mother, people mother other people. We can think of many people in our lives as students, scholars, workers, activists who have mothered us in some way. And that can be a person of any gender. So I definitely, that's a major part of what I'm trying to advance here.
And you do go into it because there was another, Kwame was also asking what goes into modernity. Yeah. And you go into that in the report that people can get right there at that green button. And since Kwame, since our brother, Dr. Konadu wasn't here with us on, please definitely get the report. And if you don't read any of ours, at least read his contribution, which is very substantive and really important. Yeah. Anyway, sorry.
Jared, I want to raise something if you don't mind.
Mm-hmm. No.
Thank you very much.
I don't mind.
There's no raise hand questions. So, so I think that, and I want to raise something that we get real scared about, but I still want to raise it. Not us in this platform, but us when we start talking about movements and activists and Pan-Africanism, there's always a class component in some of these organizations, right? And oftentimes there is a class struggle in the organizations. And the amount of access to resources or elusive power or real power that exists in the organization fuel class struggle. So we're talking about Van Jones and all of the Joy Reid and all of these other people who are on MSNBC or whatever they're on. And they have a class position that they will not commit class suicide to offend. They will not abandon their class because they have a bourgeois, petty bourgeois affiliation to US capitalism, right? And I think one of the fundamental challenges that we have in many organizations is that we do not take class struggle seriously. We do not take the question of leadership and power and who has access to power seriously. We do not look at this. Google says Reid is paid $1.5 million a year. That's you have a class affiliation and class allegiance to a certain segment of the American population, right?
What does that look like every 2 weeks? Because my chicks are like this. People are like, my joke is I can't make it rain. I can maybe make it drizzle or mist.
You can't even imagine, right? So the fact that Dan Jones is crying on TV, talking about his kids can sleep or they're free or they're safe. Your children were safe under Trump, okay? because you have a class allegiance that I do not have. And so I think, and I'm saying that to say that the moment that we begin to dissect some of these organizations, we have to recognize that some have a class allegiance to the middle and upper class in America. And those class allegiances dictate the work that they can do, right? And I agree with Yele and Todd about being in organizations and disrupting when you can in those organizations. And I say go for it. Disrupt if and when you can. What my experience has been when I was in an organization as a staff member who I didn't align with ideologically, it was 3.5 years of fight. And there was 3.5 years of fighting, and Jared is laughing, because ideologically, I didn't believe, and to be perfectly honest, the people I were fighting with were not the members of the organization, but were the administration. And to be honest, in their defense, they were clear that they were Black capitalists or so-called Black capitalists. I was not clear that I was entering an organization that was a Black capitalist organization and was talking about wealth. And let me just say this story to you. I told my mom, I'm going to work for this organization. And she said, are you sure? Are you sure they're going to align with your politics? My mom is not overly political. So when my mother asks me, am I sure that I'm going to work with this organization because of a political reason, it should have dawned on me that I would have been fighting in the organization. So I'm saying that to say that while I agree that we need to, where we're planted, we need to certainly struggle and disrupt, but we also need to find organizations where we're ideologically aligned or semi-ideologically aligned, because I'm a straight up Pan-Africanist, anti-capitalist, down with America. U.S. imperialism is a fundamental contradiction we have to deal with. It doesn't make sense for someone like that to then join an organization that's talking about Black wealth, because we're always going to be fighting ideologically about fundamentally the way in which we think the organization should go. Thank you very much.
So I have a question. I don't have a comment. I have a question to follow up on that, Mjiba. And I think this is also related to what Dr. Khalfani brings up. Yes, indeed, Kennedy. But it's about being a disruptor within these organizations. Is that even possible to join? Like, let's say the four of us decided to just get deeply involved in the reparations movement, and we wanted to kind of expand the vision and the purview, the objectives of this reparations movement to align more with what we're talking about in terms of global African liberation. So this is, and again, this is why modernity is important. People in our communities are dealing with financial trauma. They're dealing with hunger. They're dealing with lack. They're dealing with material they're dealing with poverty. So it's how do we combat these very real, everyday, mundane issues of lack of resources? How do we compete with the Black wealth messaging and the Black wealth objectives when people are struggling check to check? Like, how do we intervene in that? Because, again, modernity says we feed people. Modernity says we prioritize making sure when people are coming to our meetings and coming to these actionable things, that we make sure that they have eaten, that they have had rest, that they have had basic things covered, or we pay attention to those things that prevent people from being wholly, fully present in the work we're trying to do. But like, how do we really do that on this level? Like, and it's in our families too. My family worries about me living check to check. Sometimes my checks look like mild humidity, to Jared's point, not even a mist. We're not making it rain. It's like heavy humidity in the air. So,
it's real thick. It's real thick out here.
It's just a little thick in the air. So how do we tell someone who is struggling with food security or food insecurity to like not think about money and wealth building and think about something else that may be more abstract for people living these realities?
Anybody want to jump on that?
Yeah, I think that there's a difference between building wealth, right? Like building wealth and ensuring that one's basic human needs are met, right? Like I wouldn't tell anybody, no, don't go get a job, or no, don't buy a house, or no, that's not that to me, that wouldn't make sense, right? To tell someone who's struggling financially that you shouldn't participate in capitalist system because I drive in a car, or I go to the store with money, like currency. So that's by no means what I'm suggesting. I'm suggesting ideologically, if you know that you are anti-capitalist, right? And you are let me not say you, ideologically me, if I know that I am anti-capitalist, it doesn't make any sense for me personally to join an institution that's talking about wealth building or saying that the solution to African people's problem is America is that we don't have inheritance. Because I don't agree with that ideologically. Now, people need to build some type of wealth, and wealth can be, it's relative. What is wealth? Nobody's building wealth in America. I don't care who you are, right? Maybe you got a job, that's not building wealth. You pay a mortgage, you don't own the house. When by the time you're 155, you've paid the mortgage off, but you still owe taxes, which is why old folks are getting their houses taken from them, or there's reverse mortgages that are going in and taking people's houses and property that have been in their family for over 100 years. That's not wealth building, right? And so I think that for me, I think we need to reevaluate what wealth building is. Nobody in the wealth building, cohort is talking about owning our labor. Nobody in the wealth building cohort is saying we need to be negotiating what our youth are getting paid at McDonald's. You know what I'm saying? Ain't nobody talking about that. No one is saying that Black farmers are disproportionately pushed out of farming in the South, and white big farms are getting subsidies so they can stay alive, and Black farmers are struggling to keep their land. To me, I think if we're talking about that, then I'm down with that, right? But we're not. That's not what folks are talking about. Folks are talking about how can I get a big check, put it in my pocket, own a house which has a mortgage, which you really don't own, to somehow say that you have wealth, and that's not wealth. I'm sorry, I've dominated.
So because we're up on the end here, I just, and it even looks like Mjiba's internet is tiring. I want to, let me just ask our do we want to address, there are two questions here. Do you want to quickly address them? How do folks feel? Should we just wrap up and anyway, well, the questions just real quick are, it would be great to return somewhere down the road where the focus is solely on reparations. I think pairing it with the question of organization doesn't allow for detailed interrogation of either question or an unbalanced focus on one side of the question. I think that's a legit point. And then Dwayne here says, to Ayeli's point, we may not be a disruptor, but I always say we can be more subtle. Someone can attract more open-minded folks, something like that. So there aren't really questions. Those are two good comments, I think, and a good critique there, I think, that we will take under advisement. Let me just also invite people not only to stay in touch. Obviously, once you've registered here, you'll be updated on future events that we have. You can email us at blacklashcollective@gmail.com. We would love to hear from you. And I'll just end my part by saying thanks to all of you who joined us, and thanks to my colleagues here and comrades. And as Fred Hampton used to always say to you, we say peace if you're willing to fight for it. And anyone else want any other last words before we wrap up? No? Todd said no. Okay, well, hey, look, good people, thank you all very much. We really appreciate you coming through.
Excuse me, I can't stop by saying ready for revolution. Ready for revolution. And please announce that we're not doing it next month.
So we're not gonna be doing it next month. We'll reconvene in January. And obviously folks, stay tuned here, and we'll be posting more about that. To those who will see this after the live event, thanks to you as well for checking this out. Please share it, like it, click on it, whatever, all those other things. And we'll see you next time. Thanks a lot, everybody. Peace and ready for the revolution.
Ready for revolution, forward ever.